If you could let me know. Excellent. We're live. Hey, YouTube, welcome on in to the Lurie Daniel Favor Show experience. I know it's a little later than you all are used to, but remember, on Wednesdays, we tend to go live a little later because we have guests in our first hour. Shout out to Amani Gandhi, who is really always helping to break it down on our Wednesday mornings. We appreciate her. And she is coming out with a new podcast called Bitch Listen, and she's dope. And shout out to the Rewire News Group as well. We got a lot to get into this morning, so let's talk about it. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening at HBCU. Shout out to Tennessee State University, which was one of the HBCUs targeted by this maggot effort to invade black spaces. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We got to talk, of course, about how Satan broke the escalator at the UN and then broke the teleprompter and decided to blame everybody else for it, in addition to embarrassing the entire United States when the president spoke at the General Assembly. And we also got to talk a little bit of Jimmy Kimmel, because there are First Amendment implications for everybody when it comes to that story. So let's get into it if you don't mind. So for those of you who are not watching or paying attention to what happened at Tennessee State University, earlier this week, I believe this happened yesterday, unauthorized MAGA supporters came on campus at Tennessee State University. And this is an excerpt from this statement that was released by Tennessee State University. And they came with signs that read, DEI should be illegal and deport all illegals. Students posted about these clips and they talked about the impact. And we have some of those clips available for you. Now, if you are listening on the radio, you are going to hear these students interact with this group of people. If you are watching on YouTube, you are going to get to see this in real time. So I want everyone to pay attention. Now, I'm going to walk you and talk you through it, because it's a little chaotic. And so actually, you know what? Let me describe it for those of you who are just in the listening audience. Basically, it's a young student who is showing herself approaching this group of people. And at the center of the group of people are these white MAGA, Make America Great Again, red hat wearing folks. And they are surrounded by a group of students, but not because you know, anytime you say the black students surrounded them white boys, it always feels like they were getting very angry and violent. It wasn't that at all. It was just black students being loud as hell because we loud, because we have a right to be. And they were loudly disagreeing with the very presence of these people who were not authorized to be there, right? They were not authorized to be on this campus. They came to cause trouble, and they were shown the door, basically. So, Mina, if you could please press play, and we are going to listen to that clip just now.
MAGA supporters invaded our HBCU.
What is going on over here?
So we see them there with the MAGA hats on. There are local police officers.
For what? We created y'all knowledge. We created y'all
Come on, young blood.
We created y'all mad.
Black students using facts. You said y'all thieves. Students loudly booing, respectfully booing. Police helping these folks pack up their ish.
Showing them the door.
And they did. They were walked off the campus.
We walking them to the door, y'all. I don't even know how they got on campus. We gonna figure that out, but I don't know. They need to get like a trespass, penalty or something, because
sending them off.
Tell him it's that boy. He thought he was gonna come up like Charlie.
Yes. Say good job, TSU.
Good job, TSU, and shout out to my team for bleeping all them N-words, because even though I respect people's right to say it, we don't say, that's the one thing we don't say on these airwaves. We are not an N-word safe space here. We just don't use the phrase. I ain't judging you if you use it. I'm just saying we don't. But yeah, that happened. So, and here's what I need us to understand. One, shout out to the students, right? They did amazingly well. They handled it. They kept their composure. I want to also now read to you a statement from the NAACP, the local NAACP chapter. This is Unit 5977-B. You guys see me looking down because I have to read this on my notes because they posted it on a page. I'm gonna need y'all to put the text of your documents in the body, in the caption, because my old lady eyes just could barely hardly even see it. But the local NAACP had this to say. They said today, Tuesday, September 23rd, so this took place yesterday afternoon, at about 3 p.m., a group calling themselves Fearless Debates appeared on the campus of Tennessee State University. They wore Make America Great Again hats and carried poster boards bearing inflammatory messages such as deport all illegals now and DEI should be illegal. They attempted to draw students into conversations centered on these messages, which were framed as debate, but functioned as provocation. Shout out to Toni Morrison, who reminds us that the very function of racism is distraction. The statement goes on to say this incident was not an isolated act of political expression. It was an intentional effort to antagonize, disrupt, and instill fear in a space created to be safe, affirming, and supportive of Black students. While we recognize and respect that free speech is a constitutional right, there is a clear and urgent distinction between constructive dialogue and rhetoric deliberately designed to provoke, demean, and endanger the psychological safety of HBCU students. Thank you for that point, NAACP. They said, we are both infuriated and alarmed that groups like Fearless Debates are targeting HBCUs in 2025 with rhetoric that echoes a long history of exclusion, racism, and systemic oppression. The appearance of these individuals on the campus of Tennessee State University underscores that the politics and ideologies that threaten the beings of Black people are still real, still harmful, and still actively seeking to silence and antagonize us. We urge you, our HBCUs, our NAACP partners, and our Black leadership networks. That means everybody listening to me right now, you are included in some way in this statement, to be vigilant, to share information, and to prepare responses to ensure that students are protected from these deliberate attempts to disrupt the sanctity of our campuses. HBCUs were founded as sanctuaries of empowerment, education, and freedom, and it is our collective responsibility to preserve that legacy against those who would seek to undermine it. We will not be silenced. We will not allow outside groups to strip away the dignity, safety, and thriving of our students. The time to respond with strength and unity is now. Together in our fight for freedom. NAACP Unit 5977-B. They are the winners for today. They and those students and the group of Tennessee State University administrators who made sure that, one, our students were kept safe. However, I am concerned. As a Black parent, I'm concerned. I have seen additional reports that the students of this university can't get onto the campus unless they show their security badges, and they have a security apparatus on campus. So the way that, and I've never been to Tennessee State University, so I don't know if it's a geographically open campus or if it isn't closed. But the way a number of the students have described it was like, how did they get here in the first place? Like, how did that happen? Because there is a security apparatus in place. And so I need us to be thinking very, very critically about what preparation for these sorts of things looks like. Because any of us who have ever studied lynch mobs, any of us who have ever studied how these things happen, and in fact, I believe it was in Tennessee, I believe it was in Tennessee, where they had the People's Grocery, and the People's Grocery was a grocery store owned by Black people that was doing way better than the white-owned grocery store, and them white-owned grocery store owners got so mad that they lynched the 3 Black men who owned that grocery store and ran their families out of town, ran that community out of town, and that's one of the reasons Ida B. Wells had to flee as well, because she was reporting on these sorts of things. So Tennessee, we know that there is a rich history of white oppression and suppression and repression, but there is an even richer history of Black resistance and liberation. And so if it can happen in a space like that, I just need us to think about all of the other potentially vulnerable spaces that we occupy that need to be safe in a different way. If you don't know who the Deacons for Defense and Justice were, I'm going to need you to research that. I'm going to need you to look it up. And I need us to be thinking, should we have community safety patrols? Should we be policing ourselves in different ways? What would it look like? Because if they are taking all the resources that they provide for us that we consume, what would it look like to have a sufficient apparatus to keep ourselves safe? One of the things we often talk about when we talk about how we need to have Black-owned businesses and Black this and Black that, people always be like, well, they just going to blow it up anyway. All right, so then does that mean we just don't build anymore? No, it means we build with a plan. I know some people send their kids to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. My kids went to New African Scouts. Shout out to the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, which provided that program for them. And it was a safe, age-appropriate space where they're learning not just survival skills, but also like how to think critically about what communities need, how to think critically about how to build community. We need to have more of those sorts of things in place that aren't necessarily tied to your religion. Especially if you are one of them people who believe that you was Christian before you Black, which chronologically just could never have happened. You was born Black. You made a decision about your religion. That's another topic for another day. We've already talked a lot about Christianity, but we know that this was just the first salvo. White nationalists always come with mobs. And as Dr. Coretha Mitchell says, our success as Black people beckons the mob. It invites the mob because that mob sees our success as a threat to their ability to do anything. And unfortunately, nobody had the good sense to stop Fat Satan, as he's being called. And I'm trying not to use that phrase, but it is now trending all over social media because y'all's President Satan, basically decided that he was going to take the sort of white nationalism that them punks thought that they was going to bring into that school campus, and he took it to the UN. He took it to the UN. I talk a bit more extensively about this in the podcast. Lurie breaks it down, which will be out today at 2:00. But basically, President Satan went to the UN and showed his entire ass. Now, before I get into this, we all know that Donald Trump likes a good escalator. He launched his first campaign coming down an escalator. And yesterday, he thought he was going to take an escalator on up to where he was supposed to give his speech at the UN. But according to a Gavin Newsom fan account, instead of making his way to an escalator, Fat Satan broke the escalator. Now, I'm going to play this clip for you, and you are going to be able to see it. And now, I talked about this in the podcast, and I thought it occurred to me that, like, if you're listening to this on a podcast, you can't actually see what's happening because the podcast is not visual. At least ours isn't. So I'm going to play this for you, and you all who are watching on the internets, you will be able to see as he's approaching the escalator. Hold on, let me get my share screen up, because I think we should all witness what had happened. And so here you see it, and we're going to play it here. I mean, if you could please play this clip, and we see him and Melania approaching the escalator. Melania is getting to she's in front of him. She's got on the red bottoms, and escalator stopped. Escalator stopped, and they're stunned and puzzled, and then Melania continues to walk. And as Melania is walking up, Donald Trump laboriously tries to do the same, because we know that walking for him is not so easy these days. He can barely walk in a straight line. And basically, that was what had happened. Now, it didn't seem like a big deal. The escalator stopped. Although I will say, to be fair, like, that is dangerous, right? You don't want to be on an escalator when they can stop. I actually have kind of an internal fear about escalators and something like that happening. And basically, he got stopped in the escalator. They had to walk the rest of the way up. Then he makes it to the speech where he proceeds to embarrass this nation in ways that I was like, can this nation sink any lower? Yes, the nation could sink lots of lower. But the challenge that he was facing was, one, he was only supposed to be speaking for 10 minutes. He ends up speaking for 15. I'm not really going to play a whole lot of clips of him because it's his voice. But basically, he get up on the stage and the teleprompter ain't working. So he riffs for like an hour, right? And then he blames the people at the UN for the broken escalator. He blames the people at the UN for a broken teleprompter. And everybody's like, dang, maybe he got set up, right? Like, maybe the people at the UN might have did it. Like, maybe they was intentionally, like, messing with the escalator and messing with the teleprompter. And here's what he had to say in his own words. And let's play the clip of him complaining about this. Here's what he had to say in his own words about his embarrassment.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle.
He wasn't even on the first
If the
step.
First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape.
If he'd have been
We're
first.
both in good shape. We both stood.
They're not laughing with him.
And then
folks.
a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations: a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's working now. It just went on. Thank you.
Now, the laughter you hear there, they're not laughing with him. They're laughing at him because he had by this point utterly embarrassed himself, and in ways that were pretty embarrassing, and had embarrassed the nation. He told these people, all your nations are going to hell. He's like, I'm really good at this. All your nations are going to hell. So Jimmy Kimmel had some things to say, and he talked about this escalator gate and asked a very important question, a question that I think many of us should be wondering, like, where was this escalator before? Let's take a listen.
You know, as of this taping, the president has not weighed in on ABC's decision to put us back on the air. I don't know, maybe he's saving it for his late night toilet time, but his magnificence had other business today in New York, big business, addressing the United Nations, which got off to a rocky start when the Trumps hit the escalator and it suddenly stopped. They had to walk up. He broke the escalator. Where was that escalator 10 years ago when we needed it on the way down?
These are questions that need answering. Where was the escalator breaker then? So he goes on to blame the UN. He was blaming everybody. He was like, oh my God, this is terrible. You heard what he had to say there. And then there was an investigation. There was an investigation into Escalator Gate. And apparently it was Trump's team that gave him the escalator shaft. Get it? Shaft, like elevator shaft, but escalator instead. Y'all know I love me a corny joke. That was a good one. Escalator shaft. Anyway, all right. So the UN spokesperson, they investigated this whole situation, and they took it seriously, because the last thing you want, for at least at the very basis, as it pertains to international diplomatic affairs, you don't really want something like this being perceived as something that could happen. You don't want something like this to be politicized. So the UN, they conducted an investigation, mainly because Donald Trump had blamed everything on them. Would it surprise you to know that the failures that led to the escalator gate and to teleprompter gate were actually the makings of the WEI staff that accompanied Donald Trump? And those of you who are new to the concept of WEI, it just stands for white, entitled, and incompetent. And it's the phrase that we use and encourage others to use to describe what happens when you take overly qualified black people out of a position and replace them with somebody who's like a drunken, possibly abuser. Like Pete, his own mama say he's trash, Heck Seth. That's a WEI example. But the UN said the following, that a videographer who was stepping ahead of Trump likely triggered the built-in safety mechanism, which is designed to stop the escalator if clothing or objects get caught. According to the release from the UN, quote, the safety mechanism is designed to prevent people or objects accidentally being caught and stuck in or pulled into the gearing. The videographer may have inadvertently triggered the safety function described above. In an effort to document their arrival, a videographer from the U.S. delegation stepped onto the escalator ahead of the president and first lady. As the videographer, who was traveling backwards up the escalator, reached the top, the first lady, followed by President Trump, each mounted the steps at the bottom. At that moment, approximately 9:50 a.m., the escalator came to a stop. So it wasn't even nobody nefariously. It was your own people. It was your own people. And then when it came to the teleprompter, they did an investigation into that as well. And according to the teleprompter, no, every country that has a presenter speaking at the General Assembly, they bring their own laptops. They work the teleprompter on their own. Donald Trump need to find out who on his team don't like him enough to embarrass him like that, because you should be looking inside. But Donald Trump had a lot of things to say, so many things to say, in fact, that it was like lie after lie after lie after lie. And the lies were pretty significant because, again, they were on the central stage. And so I'm looking for my clip of Daniel Dale. Oh, I thought I had it. I may not have it. I want you all to take a listen. Hold on a minute. We might actually not use this clip. Let's use the PBS PolitiFact clip. Daniel Dale from CNN, he does this phenomenal takedown of all the lies that Donald Trump showed or talked about at the UN. But I want you all instead to take a listen to PolitiFact. This is from PBS, and we should probably be promoting PBS more anyway. Take a listen to how PBS had to correct the record. Now, if you want to hear the lying-ass liar who lied at the UN, you can Google that. The speech is everywhere. But take a listen to PolitiFact, aired by PBS, because they had some things to say about it as well.
Hi, it's Josie from PolitiFact. We fact-checked President Donald Trump's speech to the UN General Assembly, which touched on immigration, climate change, foreign wars, and more. While speaking about immigration, Trump distorted federal data on migrant children. He misleadingly said the Biden administration was responsible for 300,000 children who are, quote, lost or dead. Last year, a Department of Homeland Security report found that 32,000 unaccompanied migrant children failed to appear for immigration court dates. This happened from October 2018 through September 2023, spanning 2 presidential administrations. While the DHS report said these children are considered at higher risk for trafficking, exploitation, or forced labor, the report did not say that those children were trafficked, missing, or dead. Trump spent significant time denying climate change and criticizing renewable energy. He said that while China builds windmills, it has very few wind farms. We previously rated that pants on fire. China has 44% of the world's wind farm capacity, ranking number 1 globally and almost triple the US capacity. China is also planning or building more wind farm capacity than any other country. Trump had some choice words about the building he was speaking in. In the early 2000s, he bid on the contract to rebuild the United Nations headquarters in New York. He said he could have completed it for less, around $500 million, and that he would have used much superior marble instead of terrazzo, among other upgrades. In 2005, Trump told a Senate committee that the developer chosen for the UN building project wasn't up to the task, and estimated the work would exceed the $1.2 billion estimate and could cost closer to $3 billion. He was close. The renovation project cost about $2.3 billion when it was completed in 2017.
Oops.
Finally, Trump repeated a familiar talking point that he ended 7 wars since taking office in January.
That was some real
But that's
bullshit. Look at
misleading.
Marco
He's had a
Rubio
hand in
face.
some ceasefires around the world, including between Israel and Iran and the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. But there's little evidence he's stopped 7 wars altogether.
Because he didn't. And that's something we got to be able to say is the truth. He did not stop any... Oh, this man be a lying liar who lie all the damn time. He just lie. And according to a number of speakers and international watchers, this speech was a real signal to the rest of the world. And this is the part we got to pay attention to. I know it's one thing to kiki and laugh about it, but take a listen, for example, to the former president of Ireland, Mary Robinson, because when you think about the way that the rest of the world was laughing at him, right? By extension, because we are here and have these blue passports, they are laughing at Americans. We are going to experience a devaluation of positioning in the international world order, the likes of which I don't think many of us are clear about. And so take a listen to this president. She's the former president of Ireland, and she talks about what this has signaled to everybody else in every other one of the nations that we are supposedly in connection with in some way, shape, or form. Take a listen.
President Trump has said things like this before, but staying in the United Nations, where we know that we have to deal with the climate and nature crisis, and the science is telling us we're running out of time. It's incredibly stupid, incredibly reckless.
Stupid and reckless.
Stupid and reckless.
There's some other things too.
And where does it leave the world? Where does it leave climate change?
Well, it leaves the world able to move on. Yeah. I think it gives an opportunity for the EU. The EU has postponed its NDCs, its climate plan, but it shows a range. It needs to be the most ambitious. Europe needs to go ahead. China knows it needs to go ahead, but China also needs to cut its emissions.
We can stop it there. She says a whole lot. She goes on into that conversation, but the rest of the world is moving on. And that is going to leave those of us who are the most vulnerable in this society in increasingly more vulnerable positions. I need us to understand what it looks like to be isolated with your abuser. Right? If you are in a domestic violence situation, you are in an abusive situation, one of the most dangerous positions for you to be in is that time that occurs when you have been isolated from all of your potential opportunities for support. The other most dangerous time for people who are in domestic violence situations is when they try to leave. And that's also something that we need to consider as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about Jimmy Kimmel. We've already mentioned him once before, but there are some free speech considerations that I'm very concerned about in light of everything that's happening right now. And I see some of the calls coming in. We're going to get to those calls if you can hold on until we can get to the end of this segment. But I want you all to take a listen because remember, why did they tell us that they was firing Jimmy Kimmel? Y'all remember why? I remember why. They said it was business reasons, right? They said they didn't have the money. Same thing they said about Stephen Colbert. Same thing they said. And basically, Donald Trump is bigly pissed off. But I remember distinctly hearing that the reason they took Jimmy Kimmel off the air was for business reasons. Well, let's take a listen to this retelling of that story in case people think I'm exaggerating a little bit. Let's hear what Fox News had to say.
I've never heard them care about the Constitution so much. Their First Amendment, First Amendment. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment.
Dummy.
This has to do with the business decision, as you noted.
So the decision to suspend and I suspect eventually cancel Kimmel is a business decision by ABC.
Okay.
But similar to Kimmel, he's getting the boot because, well, he was just bad for business.
Bad for business.
You can like or not like Disney's decision on Kimmel. But until I see proof of actual government coercion of their decision, this is about Disney making a business decision about its brand.
Yeah, that was obviously a business decision, as evidenced by the fact they're going to reinstate him. I think he's going to be on the air later tonight. So I think it was a business decision.
And if ABC wants to suspend you because you got wrong the assassin of Charlie Kirk, more power to them. That's got nothing to do with the First Amendment. That's a business decision.
Business decision. It's all about business. It's pure dollars and cents in business. Well, you know what's bad for business? You losing damn near $4 billion in a couple of days because of your badass business decision. That's what has happened to Disney. Child, they done lost stock value. They done had trips canceled. People done pulled out. And I know people is big mad at Disney. And we gonna stay mad because Disney, you finna get the Target treatment in my household. Like we ain't going with Disney no more. Neither Disney nor Hulu. I'm sorry to Abbott Elementary. I'm sorry to all these other entities. I'm going to have to see something else because for me, it's not even so much that you brought Jimmy Kimmel back. I don't even watch Jimmy Kimmel. Like I ain't watched a Jimmy Kimmel episode maybe ever. I don't think I think that's a very true statement. I don't know that I've ever watched an entire episode of Jimmy Kimmel, let alone an opening monologue. I didn't even watch the opening monologue last night. I saw some clips of it and whatnot, but the reality is that Disney was willing to bow and suck the toes of fascism. I can't. It leaves a nasty taste in the mouth, almost like it just leaves a nasty taste in the mouth. And the challenge is, however, that if we only focus on Disney, we're going to also miss the real bad actors here. Disney is basically a pawn right now that's being used by an entity known as Sinclair Broadcasting. And any of you who watch John Oliver's This Week Tonight, he has talked about Sinclair Broadcasting for a very long time, but Sinclair Broadcasting is owned by Trump allies who are basically pushing their right-wing messaging into everybody's home. They own over 100 markets, over 100 local news outlets in markets all across the country. And basically what you often think might be just your local news reporting what's happening locally is usually something that is coming out of a very conservative group of people who are promoting the exact same message to everybody, okay? And that is important because Sinclair is trying to engage in a merger. And in order to have the merger go through between them and Nexstar, they are basically willing to shut down the First Amendment because they have to bow and suck the nuts of Brendan Carr. Brendan Carr is the person who is in charge of the FCC, and that is the federal agency that essentially regulates who can say what. It regulates our airwaves. It regulates the internet. It regulates a lot. And so Brendan Carr, who also is the author of Project 2025's chapter on communications, is living out his wildest, wettest, most moistest dreams right now about shutting down free speech. And he really only wants white nationalist MAGA speech. But the reason this is important is because Sinclair Media, which has previously purchased up and bought up so many of the local affiliates, they are trying to merge with this other entity known as Nexstar. And if they're able to merge, they basically gonna own everything, damn near. But if you are just like, well, I don't really understand why that's that big a deal. It just seems like, it's just a group trying to merge and whatnot. Just remember, there used to be rules that would prevent how much market share you could own of any particular media source. So if you already own 20% of all the TV stations in a market, you weren't going to be allowed to buy 30 additional percentage points because there was a recognition that we have to have diversity of thought. This was back when the First Amendment was somewhat valued, even for the whites. And then now it doesn't seem to be. So I want you all to get an example of just how foul and funky and fugazi Sinclair Media actually is. Take a listen to this clip. Now, this is a clip that is showing you different Sinclair Media broadcasters. These are people who are part of your local broadcast team, but they're all working for stations owned by Sinclair Media. Now, they're all over the country. You should not be hearing what you're about to hear if you're in Iowa, hearing the same thing we hear in say, Tennessee, hearing the same thing we hear in New York City. You should not be hearing the same thing because it's supposed to be local news. Take a listen to this clip and you'll see how Sinclair Media actually operates.
Hi, I'm Headley. Wolf. Downstairs.
No.
Ooh, thanks, y'all. Big snows.
This
dangerous.
Dangerous to our democracy.
Dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely 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 dangerous to our democracy.
We can just stop it there. You get the point, hopefully. And so the reason this matters, because whether you watch your local news affiliates or not, it really, really matters, especially for those of us who are consumers of black media. Because no, it wasn't just white voices and white faces repeating the script that Sinclair Media is jamming down the throats of Americans everywhere. And so we have to be really clear about what is at risk here. And I'm going to encourage you now more than ever to lock in with Black black media, black owned media in particular. I am here at SiriusXM. SiriusXM is not black owned. Urban View is a black targeted station. And as you know, if you listen to Urban View, we hold shit down. And I'm so grateful for our ancestor, Joe Madison, who helped to set the foundation. I am never endingly grateful for Karen Hunter, who holds space and allows an environment where we can talk the truth and say what needs to happen. I am grateful for the Urban View family, because one thing the Urban View family going to do is demand integrity. And I love that because it allows us to operate in ways that we can be integral and we can be honest and we can be truthful and we can say the things that need to be said. But you need to lock in with black media. I'm going to say Urban View is an exception when it comes to non-black owned but black targeted media. And I'm saying that because yesterday afternoon, a shout out to all the folks I'm about to mention. I had an opportunity to moderate a conversation that many of you were able to participate in. It was a virtual conversation for black media. And I was joined by some amazing people at this virtual event that was put together by two groups, the Publicist Forum and BOMISI. And BOMISI stands for, I hope I'm going to get this right because I focused and I tried to make sure I wrote it down. BOMISI stands for the Black Owned Media Equity and Sustainability Institute. And shout out to, I'm going to name the names, the Publicist Forum by Aaliyah Crawford, Michelle Huff-Elliott, Sarita Oglesby, Simone Smalls, and BOMISI's co-founders Ronisha Bing and Davon Christopher Johnson. They hosted a phenomenal conversation, and it wasn't phenomenal because I moderated it, although I did. But if you look up BOMISI's YouTube page, BOMESI, you'll be able to see that entire conversation in the video. And it was amazing. The panelists included Natasha Alford, who's the senior vice president of the GRIO, Ray Holiday, who's the founder of the Holiday Group, Davon Christopher Johnson, who I already mentioned, the co-founder and CEO of BOMISI, Corey Murray, the EVP of editorial content at The Ebony Magazine, and Daytwan Thomas, CEO of Daylight Media Inc. and consultant for Penske Media Corporation. They brought decades of insight into black media, both in print and digital and beyond, and was absolutely phenomenal. And this was the first of many conversations that are going to be had. And we're going to continue having those conversations here as well. And the calls to action that I'm going to share with you now. And Amina, I didn't get a chance to put this in the podcast episode, so remind me, take this snippet and add this to the podcast, please. The calls to action for those of you who want to support black media, very, very simple. Number one, take stock of how many black-owned media outlets you support, not just with your eyeballs, but with your dollars. And the reason that matters is because, as we discussed yesterday, the money situation for black media is disastrous right now, and we need people to be in support. So that means you should be subscribing to 5 black media outlets and alerts and newsletters by this time tomorrow. I know y'all are here for the Lurie Daniel Favors experience and the show, and I love you and I appreciate you, but you need to be subscribing to 5 black media outlets and newsletters by tomorrow. We are asking that you purchase an online or print subscription to a minimum of 3 black consumer magazines and 2 black newspapers. We are asking that you use the hashtag support black media to help amplify black voices. I do everything that I can to promote black voices in this space, but I also see my YouTube numbers, and I know that when we take the interviews that we do here on Urban View and we put them on YouTube, they do not do as well as the interview or the conversations when I have direct live engagement. So we need us to not just be listening, we need us to be sharing, to be encouraging other people in our lives to get in touch with black-owned media and lock in. Lock in. We don't own these airwaves. We do not own these airwaves. And shout out to the continent of Africa that's created its whole ass own internet. Oh my God, Africa is rising right now in ways that are just so amazing. But here in these United States, where we got President Fat Satan breaking escalators and teleprompters and blaming everybody else, we don't own these airwaves. And I need us to be as intentional about supporting black-owned media as we were intentional about boycotting Target. Do you see how this works? Do you see how this works? You ain't even got to agree with all the media that you support it. And we got to talk about the fact that a lot of black media today also has a lot of challenges because the black consumer is much more willing to consume images of black women beating each other's ass on baddies and shit like that than they are willing to listen to actual news. That is something that we, the consumer, have to own, and we, the consumer, are going to have to change our consumption habits. And we're going to have to bring in more content that is uplifting, that is educational. And I know it is titillating and feels good to our lower level energy to see black people calling each other bitch this, bitch that, and throwing wine and this and the other. I'm sorry, I have been a black woman for 40-something years. I am 45 years old. And I ain't never been at an event with my sister friends where we tossing bottles at each other and yelling at each other. Black women don't do that unless you getting paid to make us look like fools. Turn that shit off. And don't support the black media participants who encourage us to do nothing but consume the worst images of ourselves, because we will reflect that. And that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. We're going to hold it there. YouTube, we appreciate you. Thank you all who are part of this YouTube experience. The podcast episode, the Breaks It Down, will drop later today at 2 o'clock. And we encourage you all to get that as well, because we go into more depth in those stories in